Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Donut Hole, your place where a couple of guys sit around and pontificate. My name's Paul,
And I'm Jason.
and it is July 7th, coming at you from our studios here in Nashville. So, obviously, we've been off a week or two.
Yeah.
Kind of craziness going on. It seems that we're kind of doing the show every 2 weeks or so at this point. But, who knows how things will keep going in the future. Let's go ahead and, I guess, get into some of the show prep for today. So, obviously, some of this news is going to be a little older than some of the other things. Some things will be newer, some things will be older, but it is what it is. So we're going to cover some interesting stuff today. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is the whole Antifa beating up old people and journalists and really just anybody in the street.
Yeah, just general chaos in the streets, and it's my understanding that the mayor of Portland actually told the police to stand down. So he's complicit in it as well.
Yeah. So that happened. Obviously, the one journalist got beat up pretty bad.
Yeah,
There was also, I believe, another old guy that got the crap beat out of him as well.
yeah,
And only recently, after much public outcry, have there been arrests in the situation.
yeah. Which is it's good that there are finally some arrests. I mean, these type of people that would do this sort of thing are obviously very dangerous people, and it's completely politically motivated. They can say anti-fascist all they want, but the guy they beat up hit a couple of their protected class talking points as leftist. He's a gay man. He's Asian. So it's gone past this where they say it's a fascist extreme right wingers. I don't think the alt-right would welcome a gay Asian man into their ranks. I don't know, but it seems like they're pretty much against that stuff. So I think the guy was just basically a traditional conservative, center of the road, independent journalist type. And that just goes to show you where Antifa is. They're not just targeting the extreme right wingers a la Charlottesville like they claim they are.
Yeah.
They're also targeting very moderate conservatives as well.
Yeah. So clearly that's not okay. But it seems that that's kind of the just the business as usual in a lot of these places. Because I believe you also mentioned, we were talking earlier while we were doing show prep, that there are some cities out there now where DAs just refuse to prosecute things.
Yeah, I've heard Baltimore and Dallas. I don't know which one's which. I can't remember the list of all the things. But I know one of the cities is going to stop prosecuting theft under $750 if it's not violent. So shoplifting, just simple property crime. Now, I do believe they are still going to prosecute if it's a violent offense. But it's under the guise of this, once again, social justice ideas that we're simply not going to enforce the laws because they disproportionately affect certain people.
Yeah, and this is how you ultimately end up stirring up more hatred among certain groups, is by letting groups get away with crimes against the rest of society. So
Yeah.
they don't really seem to realize this is only going to further divide. This is only going to further exacerbate an already existing problem.
Well, and it's not helping the people they're purporting to help.
Yeah.
It's only going to make those people feel more entitled to commit crimes, the lower socioeconomic spectrum, and then it's going to also create the middle class and upper class people to look down upon them even more. And also, the term white flight from cities, I think that's probably more socioeconomic than it has to do with color. You're going to see that in these cities. You're going to see the people are still going to work there because that's where the high rise is for the banking complex. But they're going to live an hour outside of town.
Well, yeah,
they're not going to be in a place where somebody can steal $750 from you and have no consequences.
Exactly, and this is something we saw prior. And if you look at history seemingly repeating itself because it seems people that are in control of policy are complete idiots. But we saw this in obviously the 40s, 50s, and 60s with, as you mentioned, white flight from urban centers, and then the urban decay that followed, which to some degree has always continued on. But obviously now with some places, there's kind of a return to the cities in some regards. Obviously, you got to get this new gentrification, if you will. I mean, obviously, look at Nashville; it's definitely that way right now. A lot of places that were kind of sketchy areas of town are now becoming the new cool, posh places to be. But again, that's going to start to reverse if these kind of policies continue to be enacted. And the reason I think that these places are becoming the new posh, cool places through gentrification And it's happening more so in places like the South, where there's generally better economic and in some regards political policies that allow for more of a free market type
Yes.
atmosphere, lower taxes,
More
lower
business friendly. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what kind of has brought people here, because it's not the stifling hellholes that they came from.
Yeah.
But oddly enough, they're starting to slowly turn it back into those hellholes, which is going to produce the same effect. You're going to get, flight from urban areas. And then, of course, urban decay and lots of crime.
Well, we're seeing it in Nashville right now. It's the same cycle as it is in other cities. It's a little bit different here. It's more of a tourist destination. But we're already seeing law enforcement look the other way in Nashville for minor things because they're tourists, because we don't want to chase out our economic base.
Yeah.
Well, public intoxication completely just overlooked now. We have party buses with people just obviously way above the legal limit. We have party buses and pedal taverns blaring music, at an extremely loud level, disturbing the rest of the populace. And we're kind of starting to see that. I'm starting to see that even some of the newer residents are like, "Hey, man, what's going on with our city here?" It's a bit much, but they're basically selling out to get the money.
And some of those things are not quite as bad. I mean, like a little bit of public intoxication. Obviously, if you limit it to its scope, if you limit it to like Broadway, that's fine, because everyone's going to be tanked on Broadway because it's bar,
Right.
honky tonk bar,
Right.
Which is the way it is. That's fine. The pedal taverns, they're irritating. I think some of the problems come in place where people are so drunk on the pedal taverns that they're falling off.
Yes,
And
which I've seen personally several times.
and the music being blared so absolutely insanely loud. Because when you're on Broadway, blare the crap out of it because you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
But once you start getting off onto some of the more side streets, you kind of gotta hit the volume button a little bit, Actually, this is a little off topic. Actually, I have this brilliant idea for an invention. I probably shouldn't say it on the podcast, but I'm going to anyway. So if any of you guys are listening, I have a brilliant idea for you guys. This is a multi-million-dollar idea. This will make you lots of money. I just am not in a position to do anything with it. But it would be a device that would have a microphone, and you would use a signal oscillator or some sort of signal canceller, so it would not hear the music that it's being pumped out, but it would pick up the ambient sound around you, and it would adjust the volume accordingly. This would actually be really good for restaurants, right? So you know, like restaurants have I know this is totally off topic. You know how like restaurants have like a music system, right? That plays.
Sure.
And as more people fill into the restaurant, you can't hear the music, so the manager has to go back in, turn it up.
Which causes people to talk louder
and louder. But now imagine a microphone that was placed in the room that would adjust the music volume accordingly to the volume of the place.
Yeah.
Of everything except for the music itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and also do a little bit of noise cancellation too, so it doesn't have to keep ramping up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
$1 million idea, guys. If any of you guys out there that are watching the show are in a position to do that, cut me a 1% check and I'll be happy. Idea's all yours. So anyway, where were we? Nashville and pedal taverns.
And this is obviously nowhere near the level of like letting Antifa riot, but it's still just endemic of this, like you said, this gentrification, this idea of just overlooking things when it's convenient. Because that is something as a Nashville resident that I have seen a lot, is overlooking laws that are inconvenient. And I think that's where that road eventually leads, is things like that.
And again, like I said, the minor things of like, especially if it's centrally, you centrally locate the problem areas. Like, okay, Broadway's going to be a disaster because it's bars and people are going there to drink and party. That's fine. But it's when you start spilling it out to like West End or some other areas of town, it's like, all right, guys, let's contain this. Let's contain this a little bit.
But to me, the worrying thing is not that in and of itself. That's just annoying, is all it is, really.
It's a step.
Yeah, but it's a step. Because then the next step is like Portland, Oregon. Eventually, well, what are we going to do about the protesters? Well, we don't want to get a bad name. We don't really want to have a, big to-do with the police. Just let them do what they need to do and go home. And it's this same attitude. It's the whole slippery slope fallacy.
Yeah.
which I didn't actually used to believe in as much, but here lately, with a lot of the things going on in America, I definitely believe in the slippery slope.
Yeah, because I mean, you can't have people rioting and causing excessive property damage because then that hurts the businesses that are there. That causes an economic downturn. People leave. In conjunction with that and the higher crime, obviously, things like property damage and possible physical violence, people are going to slowly start to leave. Economic downturn is going to start to hit the city, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse until it turns into Detroit. And yeah, I mean, Detroit's a really gorgeous city. I mean, actually, I was born just outside of Detroit in Pontiac, Michigan. And I was up there, it was several years ago, but it was on a trip. It was in the summertime, so it was obviously Michigan's much better in the summertime. You never want to go in the winter. But going around, driving through Detroit, you can see some really gorgeous architecture.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame because you see all this gorgeous architecture and then you see like these firebombed buildings looking, that have just been burnt down from, vandals and looters and just idiots.
Yeah.
And it's really a shame because Detroit is a really interesting city with a lot of history and culture. And like I said, the architecture is amazing. You got the Riverside. It's actually really cool. You got all the, there's a lot of museums and stuff there. It's
Yeah,
actually
very important to
really-
American history.
It's
Yeah.
a really cool place. And yet you wouldn't catch me dead, living there.
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. And
not gonna
unfortunately, I see a lot of U.S. cities going that way. And I don't say necessarily like Detroit where it's most of the city, but you look at Chicago, there's huge areas nobody would ever move to if they had a choice.
See, I would actually rather move to Detroit over Chicago because at least Michigan has decent gun laws.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chicago is extremely restrictive.
Yeah, I can carry a gun in Detroit. I can't carry a gun in Chicago. Unless I'm in the airport, I'm not going to Chicago.
Yeah.
I have had to connect through there a few times, but yeah, I won't go to Chicago.
And you're seeing this, because of the current political climate and because everybody's afraid to be called some sort of racist, homophobe, bigot of some sort. We've become very permissive in these cities of a lot of things. You're starting to see this, I know in Philly recently, Memphis over the 4th of July weekend, we're seeing these quote unquote flash mobs, which I remember a day when a flash mob was just a bunch of people dancing for a YouTube video.
Exactly. Right.
But what they do is, I know this has happened twice in Philly recently. They turned over police cars, about 1,000 people basically just going wild in the streets, doing whatever they want. And then there was another incident in Philly where it was about 10 to 20 guys just went into a North Face store, stole as much as they could within 30 seconds, and were gone. And of course, when you have that amount of people, you can't blame security for not doing anything. I mean, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And then apparently we had another quote-unquote flash mob incident in Memphis where 30, 40 kids were throwing fireworks at people, ended up assaulting a woman and her husband, eventually got broken up. But this kind of stuff is just lawlessness. And a lot of the reason people think they can get away with this stuff is because they see on the news that it's happening, so they think they can get away with it.
And then they do.
Yeah, and then they do. And I would be willing to bet that in all these cases combined is maybe only a handful of arrests, whereas everybody should be arrested that's involved. And I know the police only have so many resources, but you got to get that stuff under control.
So let's actually kind of move this along into some of the next areas we're going to talk about. Let's see. We talked about the failure to prosecute minor offenses. Jussie Smollett and his pre-noosed self walking out of the out of his apartment. So we were talking earlier during the show prep time, and you had mentioned the fact that that there's now a new uncovered or leaked video. At least I think the Chicago PD has, because obviously they're dealing with this kind of goofiness all the time.
Yeah.
They're starting to get a little fed up. So obviously Jussie Smollett, the DA, failed to refused to prosecute in that instance. But they leaked a video of him, surveillance video apparently of him, I guess, walking out of his apartment with the noose around
Yes,
his neck.
the video basically showed him walking out of a building. I'm not sure if it's his apartment, but I think the article said it was. Walking out of a building with the noose on his neck and passing by the brothers, the Nigerian immigrants, and one of them was wearing the red hat that he had purchased the day before to look like a Trump hat. So funny they mentioned the Trump country thing because they couldn't find a Trump hat, so he had to purchase a red hat because they could not find one in Chicago. So they would have had to order one online, and that would have taken too long. They had to get this thing done.
Yeah.
Because the newest narrative with Smollett is that the brothers attacked him, and his lawyer went so far as to say that the brothers, Nigerian brothers, may have been wearing whiteface, and that may have been why he believed that they were white Trump supporters. So
That's special.
the real victims in this case, other than the American public in general, because it's just
Would be the Chicago Police Department.
and those poor Nigerian brothers. You
Yeah.
think this whole thing was a social justice setup to begin with. He's a gay black man. We're gonna invoke the name of Trump and racism, while all along you have Nigerian immigrants that are getting blamed for the whole thing. So I think the social justice narrative kind of fell apart there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It is very ironic, but those guys shouldn't have participated in the hoax. But I kind of got to feel a little bad for them.
Yeah, you do, because I think at the end of the day they were hired. I think it was officially supposed to be an acting job.
Yeah,
That's what it was
Yeah.
on paper. So
Yeah.
and then they kind of got screwed.
yeah. And now they're
So,
being accused of masterminding the whole thing. So that's feel bad for them. They shouldn't have participated in it, but they're a couple of immigrant guys trying to bust into the acting world. They're trying to, do whatever they can for this guy they know who's an actor, and they probably think he's so great. And
Maybe he can
And
get him
then-
a part in a
and-
small
yeah,
part
and
somewhere.
and
they
this
can
is the way he
make-
treats 'em.
Yeah,
Yeah.
make the American dream, and then they
Yeah.
get screwed. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So fun. I don't even know what to say to that.
yeah, just ridiculousness. It's just silly stuff.
Yeah. Obviously, we had 4th of July over the weekend, or during the week, I should say. It is the weekend now. And there was a big to do about Trump's his tanks. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing with the whole 4th of July parade. And got to call it calling it the way I see it. Call balls, call strikes. Here's what it is. But Trump made a ridiculous gaffe on the microphone.
Yeah, I did not know about this until you had just showed it to me about an hour ago. I've been working all weekend, busy, and that was pretty bad with the whole airports thing. That was
Yeah.
That's third grade history right there, guys.
Yeah, I don't think George Washington took over Newark
No,
or JFK.
no, I don't think he was shaking hands with the Wright brothers. So,
No.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. And like I said, when we were doing show prep, I kind of likened it to Obama's 57 states or whatever the heck
Yeah.
he said. So while I did say that I can understand how these guys in these positions can make these gaffes, because they do it all the time, and sometimes they're just on autopilot and they don't realize what's coming out of their mouth. Even so, it's still pretty bad.
Yeah, because I don't think Jefferson was flying an F-16.
No.
Although that would be kind of cool.
That would make for like a cool science fiction novel, maybe. But not in a. Actually, that's a good idea.
I
for
was going to say
science
that's a
fiction
really
novel.
good idea. Do like a contemporary remake of American history.
Yeah, take the exact events of American history, but move them into 2018 technology, 2019 technology.
Yeah.
But you're telling the story from perhaps 2100, 2200.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Yeah, so imagine it's like Tom or Paul Revere is not riding through, but he's on Facebook and Twitter going,
Yeah, yeah.
the British are coming,
Yeah.
like tweeting this stuff out. It's getting retweeted around the globe.
Well, and nowadays, he'd be crossing the Delaware on paddle boards.
Yeah.
Like some hipster in flip flops. Going.
Actually, I think it's a really brilliant idea. Well, today's the show of brilliant ideas. So again, if you guys are a filmmaker out there, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially with this gaff. It's ripe in people's minds, so you might start to do something with that. Yeah, that's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, they took airports. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We all know Trump's a ridiculous human being, though, sometimes. And
Yeah.
He didn't pause one bit, just kept going.
You almost have to think that maybe, like I think you brought this up, that I think there's like maybe a speechwriter was just trying to have some fun with him or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's, and if we get Joe Biden, Biden's a gaffe machine. Always has been in the past. So a Biden versus Trump would be, whatever anybody thinks, it would be entertaining. It would be extremely entertaining. Plus, maybe they can have that old man fight they talked about.
That'd be cool.
Biden says he's going to take him out by the gym, and Trump said he's going to kick his ass. Maybe they just have an old man fight on stage.
That'd be great. That'd be even better than the debate.
They'd be
honestly.
sad. They'd both end up on their knees clutching at their heart, But
Hey, we'd be better for it.
I remember when we thought Reagan was old for running. These guys, wow.
And
Once again, just
Joe Biden tag teams Bernie Sanders in.
Yeah, yeah. And Bernie's over 80. So, yeah, he could drop the atomic elbow. We could get Mitch McConnell involved, the turtle.
Yeah.
Just dress him up like a Ninja Turtle. We could go full idiocracy with this thing.
It'd be good.
Yeah. Which I think kind of leads into our next thing, doesn't it? The debates there?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, is about the debates. And actually, while we were doing it, took the notes over and took another little note, which I thought was hilarious. Something I was meaning is as we're warming up, because neither one of us got any sleep last night, hardly. Brain was a little foggy during show prep. But yeah, so the Democrat debates were absolutely hilariously bad and just cringeworthy.
Yeah.
One of the other things, I don't know if you know much about this, but I believe Kamala Harris, I can't say her name.
It's like Pamela, but with a K. Kamala.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. She was saying that she was in support of reparations. Comes to find out, I guess, obviously, DJ TJ tweeted or retweeted somebody saying something to the effect that she was actually Jamaican of heritage and et cetera, not.
Yeah, she's not American of heritage.
And,
'cause she's half Indian and half Jamaican. So it's not as if she had heritage from,
the U.S. And so he retweets that. Is this true? And then, of course, he's accused of being a racist and, just for saying that. And then, boom, down his, deletes the tweet. But come to find out, rumor has it, I haven't gotten a full confirmation on this yet, but there were some reports saying that not only is she Jamaican, but her Jamaican relatives owned a plantation.
I've heard that. I've heard that there's evidence of in the past that, yes, she came from slave owners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of ironic, I suppose.
Yeah. Because contrary to popular belief, there were a lot of black slaveholders.
Yes, especially
in the Caribbean.
I was going to say less so in the in North America.
And there was some in North America.
Yeah.
In Virginia, there was some, but that I know. I'm sure there was in every state. But yeah, the Caribbean, it was way more widespread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely kind of interesting information.
Yeah, which, watching a lot of these issues are just, I don't take a lot of these Democrat candidates seriously because these issues are not serious issues. Slavery reparations is not a serious issue to me because how are we going to divvy up the money? Who are we going to take it from? Majority of the population of this country came after the Civil War. The whole Ellis Island thing happened well after. So majority of your white population in this country that came from Europe came over on ships through Ellis Island, which was well after the Civil War. So how should those people be penalized? A lot of those people are Scotch-Irish who were oppressed people themselves. So
the Italians were as well. A lot of immigrant groups were,
Right.
At some point.
The English look down, basically, people of English descent look down on Irish. They look down on Italians. So you're going to take taxes from those people. And who do you give it to? I mean, how many black immigrants do we have come after the Civil War?
Obviously got the two Nigerian guys.
Yeah. I'm all for giving them some reparations, those poor bastards. And it's just a shameless, divisive tactic. I don't think they needed to do it to garner votes from the black community. The black community votes overwhelmingly Democrat already. It just is a shameless, divisive thing that they're doing, and I don't believe it's a serious policy. You're basically saying you're going to hand somebody cash because of the color of their skin. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, they're just ensuring the loyalty of a voting bloc. Because politicians are cynical people, and that's what they're doing. Because otherwise, if it was a serious policy, we would look into who needs to pay for it. Because obviously, you don't punish the Irish descent guy who's working in a factory making $15 an hour, and who needs to receive it. Obviously, the Jamaican guy who came here 40 years ago, whose family came here 40, 50 years ago, doesn't need to receive it. So it's way too muddy of an issue to even talk about, and I just don't take this kind of thing seriously. It's just pandering to me.
Yeah. So there was that, and of course, every single Democrat candidate's like, "Yeah, we're gonna, ban as many guns as possible. We do this."
Sure.
I think Joe Biden was talking about only allowing smart guns or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's a big red flag for me, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everybody got mad at the Starbucks guy. Of course, the news cycle's so fast, I can't even remember his name now.
Yeah.
Howard Schultz, I believe.
Schultz. Yeah.
They got mad at him for saying, hey, somebody needs to be a centrist. And of course, we talked about it with all these radical centrism articles. And if that guy was to get the Democrat nominee, I would consider voting for him.
Yeah, possibly.
Because he said, hey, we're not going to worry about these social justice things. We're not going to worry about, he wanted to worry about, let's move America forward, better jobs, better standing in the world. Let's not be so inflammatory with our policies as far as on the international stage. Things that kind of everybody can get behind.
Yeah.
But of course, they made sure he was not a part of this real quick.
Yeah.
And that's once again why I don't take really any of them seriously, except I take Joe Biden somewhat seriously. Because the rest of them, we see them get on stage and they're being asked questions and they answer in Spanish, but they didn't even answer the question. It's the new way of avoiding the question. They just speak bad Spanish. And you had two candidates. I did laugh when, who was the first guy who did it?
I think it was Beta O'Dork.
Oh, that's right, because then Cory Booker was shooting him hard side-eye.
Yeah.
Like, really staring him down. And I thought, man, maybe it's because Cory Booker thinks this guy's being ridiculous. No, it's because Cory Booker had planned the same stunt and was mad that he got to it first. Because he proceeded to, later in the debate, get up there and answer a question in Spanish. Talking about the immigration situation being completely unacceptable. And he, said it in Spanish. And it's just ridiculous pandering. And then you have, Elizabeth Warren, who's actually coming up in the polls, looking like somewhat of the front leader right now. Her and Joe Biden.
Biden's been slipping a little bit.
Because his woke credentials aren't woke enough.
Yep. That's what it is.
And Elizabeth Warren's ridiculous, too, talking about student loan forgiveness. Like, oh, yeah, that's good. I love how they say they're for the downtrodden, but they're going to tax factory workers who never had the opportunity to go to college to pay for people who got a college degree.
Yeah, again, when it comes to the whole college loan forgiveness bit, the only thing I can see as a legitimate claim to be able to do would be a civil suit against the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Finance Board.
Yeah.
Or what have you. Because truth of the matter is the Department of Education, they were basically peddling a product the entire time that these kids were in school. Any other industry would do that. It would be considered predatory lending.
Right.
So
I have no business. I have no problem with the banks that made these loans falling apart because they made bad loans.
That's what I think too.
I have no problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is the American government paying off students' loans for people that do over a lifetime have a higher income trajectory than those with not a college degree. Even still to this day, that is true. While the factory worker pays for it through his taxes. I vehemently oppose that. As a matter of fact, I would say it's immoral.
Yeah.
To tax the poor to pay for the middle class.
Exactly. Now, every financial institution that picks up these loans, I think it's on them because here they are. And this is a very negative thing, that the fact that this is the one singular debt item in the United States that cannot be removed via bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So no matter how bad your circumstances are, you can't get rid of it, ever.
Well, I tell you, the way to fix it is to make it bankruptable, not retroactively, because that's just essentially paying for everybody's student loans. You make it bankruptable starting today, and you take away the federal guarantee. And then banks have to actually make a decision based upon, okay, this guy, he's got this grade point average. He looks like he's on the path to becoming a doctor. It's a pretty good loan for us. We're going to make some money off this guy, and he's going to be successful. Let's write that loan. Whereas the kid who comes in with a mediocre grade point average and says they want to go to class for, lesbian skydiving, well, they're not going to get a loan because the bank's going to say, oh, no, this is a bad loan. This person's never going to make money off their degree. We're going to be stuck with it after they go bankrupt. So I think that's the solution. And I know a lot of people would be very opposed to that because it would take away the federal guarantee. But you have to take away the federal guarantee because otherwise, you're forcing the poor taxpayers, the factory workers, and whatnot, to pay for that.
And moreover, I think tuition at state schools should be lower, and textbooks should not cost $500 for a textbook. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't care what's in that textbook,
Yeah.
unless it's a giant chunk of gold. There's nothing that
Yeah, I
valuable
can
in a
even
textbook.
understand $100.
Yeah, but
Because there's
five-
good profit margin in that. I understand they're a lot more expensive to produce than say a paperback novel.
No, that's the thing is you actually have paperback textbooks now that are that
do you
kind of
now?
money. Yeah.
Because when I was younger, it was all
Oh no, not anymore.
Yeah.
No, you get paperback textbooks, and it'll be like $100 for a paperback textbook this thick.
yeah. Well, when I say I can understand $100, I'm talking about
A textbook,
yeah, like
thick
a medical,
cardboard.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Maybe even $1.80 on that.
Yeah,
that's
right.
reasonable. There's some
Right.
research that goes into that. I'm a reasonable human being, but no, I'm talking about like you got a little paperback thing that's like that thick, and it costs you $80.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
And it's actually not even a full size book. It's just slightly bigger than this pad of paper.
And hey, I'm all for saying, hey, let's go double what the price for a paperback novel would be. The price for a paperback novel that size would be about $5. Mm-hmm. Let's charge 10.
No, you can charge 20. It's
Charge
reasonable.
24 times. Yeah. And we also have to get into kids' heads too that college isn't the answer for everybody.
No.
We do need tradesmen desperately in some places, especially on the bigger, heavier trades. Like I know we have to import, a lot of people from China to fix hydroelectric generators because we don't have people that can work on our dams. There's only so many people in the country that can do this, and we don't have enough.
Yeah.
Those are good paying jobs.
Oh yeah.
Really
Six
good
figure.
paying job. Yeah. Another thing I believe is windmill technicians for all the wind power.
High end power lines.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually
Like the extremely high voltage one, the metal ones that are way up
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually worked with a guy who used to be a chef, and he changed career because he had a family and didn't want to be a chef anymore, and that's what he does, is work on the power lines and cutting them and putting them up and, cutting the trees down and everything. But there's so many of those jobs that are really good jobs that have really just unlimited potential depending on, even an electrician, you start your own business. A plumber that I've used in Portland before, because he's kind of in a rural county and he's one of the only good reputable plumbers up there. He said, man, to take a vacation, he owns his own company. He says, I have to just turn down work. And the guy's probably making $200,000 a year, $250,000 a year. So that potential is there in those trades. And a lot of times it's higher than college. And I think kids need to be shown that option.
Yeah.
Because we've got to this societal attitude of, if you don't go to college, you're lesser, and you don't have a potential to make money, and that's just simply not true.
And also, in that same vein, I think people should be able to get into professional careers without going to university.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Say, for example, somebody wants to be an attorney. I think if somebody does independent study and they can go and pass the bar exam, even if you make it a mandatory requirement of you must work as a legal assistant for 1 year at a law firm. Okay, fine. But I think with all that combined, working at a law firm for a year in some capacity, as like a legal assistant or paralegal or something like that, and then passing the bar on your own, as long as you pass the bar in your area of study, and maybe they'll have like different area study bar exams as well. So so you have like the general bar exam, and then you'd have like specific bar exams in each state. It's like, okay, you're going to practice criminal law, you're civil law, you're this, that, and the other, whatever. As long as you pass that, I think here you go. You're an attorney.
Yeah, because if you're an estate attorney that does wills and whatnot, why would you have to learn about algebra for that?
No.
And this is where apprenticeships come in. And honestly, attorneys is one of those good examples, because that's one of the things, like pre-Civil War, a lot of the attorneys in this country had no university education whatsoever.
Yeah.
They did what you said. They studied on their own. They went to the library, and that's where the bar exam comes in. Is we don't know if you know your stuff, so take this exam and we'll see. Oh, you do. Okay,
Yeah.
you're a lawyer.
Exactly. And so you could do the same thing with medical. Actually, back in the day, they used to. It was the same kind of deal. Medical school was not necessarily a thing. I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate medical school or law school, because you can learn a lot in those places. But at the same time, if you can go and study independent study on your own and learn enough to be general practitioner, and you can take a medical exam saying, boom, this is what I know.
Yeah.
if you know the stuff, does it really matter where you learned it? Does it matter that you sat in a classroom to learn it, or
Right.
that you sat in the library and learned it?
Right, as
on
long
your
as you
own?
can pass the test.
As long as you do it. And I can even see like maybe having to, again, same thing. You have to intern at a hospital for 2 years.
Well, and I
Okay.
understand, and it wouldn't wipe out medical school or law school because, there's a difference between you're the estate attorney guy, you're never really in court, you're just filing a bunch of paperwork, and you're the DA prosecuting murderers. Well, the DA prosecuting murderers, you might want him to go to law school just to get that extra little bit of education because he's going to be prosecuting different crimes. It's going to be way more involved than, say, the tax guy, or.
But on the same time, but the guy that put himself through to study it himself, he's going to have more drive.
Yeah. And if he knows it, he knows it.
Yeah.
Now, with doctors, I think it'd be a bit different because you'd still want like a specialist probably to go to medical school, like say a neurosurgeon.
But again, you got a neurosurgeon who knows the stuff.
Well, or you just make it's probably a longer process if it was an apprenticeship. Like you'd have to become a general practitioner first.
Obviously.
And then,
obviously,
because if you go to medical school, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just go through, do your internship and become a surgeon. Well, if you did it through, just an apprenticeship, you would become basically a nurse, then a general practitioner. And then if you chose to go into further areas of study, you would have to also take classes. It's not like we're saying there's no classes involved, especially for doctors.
Yeah.
Because you're studying under other doctors. They would be there to teach you.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, I think you should also have a system where colleges would accept, like once you got your medical license, you got your general practitioner license, that at that point you could then go to university, right at the level of where the normal guy would be going to
Sure.
split careers to be a neurosurgeon. You can just go in and just take the neurosurgeon part,
Right.
And then boom, you got that degree,
Right.
You know. It's kind of like a system that we currently have where you go for an associate's degree, take that associate's degree, roll that into a bachelor's degree, take that bachelor's degree, roll it into a master's degree, etc.
But some of this stuff is absolutely ridiculous. The college requirements. It's funny you mentioned medical. I was visiting my father in the hospital. He just had his hip replaced, and medical technology is amazing. He was climbing steps 2 or 3 hours later.
Yeah.
But he was asking the physical therapist lady, and I don't know if she was a physical therapist or an assistant or what have you. But he just says, what's the minimum to be a licensed physical therapist now? He said, is it a master's? And she said, no, it's a doctorate now. So now just simply to be a physical therapist, you have to be a doctor. And where a lot of this is coming from, and people, your average person would think this is a good thing. Well, not necessarily. What this is coming from is that there's so many people that have college degrees
That they're
without
useless.
jobs that they become useless. So next thing you know, the master's degree is the level because the bachelor's degree doesn't mean much. And I remember even when I was young, an associate's degree was considered something. Like you could get a retail management job or a restaurant management job with no experience if you had an associate's degree.
Yep.
It was kind of associate's degree or applicable experience. Now it's bachelor's degree or applicable experience. Associates doesn't mean anything anymore.
No. Not unless it's in a very specialized field.
Yeah.
Like something really, maybe you can get away with something in like IT or something like that.
Yeah.
Or something, I don't know. Or in a trade school. You
Yeah.
can get associates in a trade school, and that means something.
And ultimately, these universities will never stop taking advantage of people as long as society is buying. The two biggest lies of the university is that number one, you have a college degree, you're automatically going to make more money. No, you still need to find a good career and you still need to try hard.
Yep.
And number two, the other biggest lie is if you have a degree, you're educated. I know people with no. I worked with a guy that worked as a bartender who was in Mensa. Super smart guy, and I've worked with people who have had college degrees that don't know their head from a hole in the ground.
Yep.
So, when the whole system is based on just regurgitating what you learned last week for a test this week, and then you just forget about it and move on, it doesn't make you educated at all.
No.
So those are the biggest lies about the university system that and I will say the American public has to accept that first as well. They have to understand that just because you have a college degree does not mean you're well educated or smart. And vice versa too. Just because you don't have one, just because you're an electrician means you're a dumb blue collar guy.
Yeah.
We've gotten beyond that in this world.
Yeah, exactly. Because the electrician who's the dumb, quote unquote, dumb blue collar guy knows a lot about electricity.
And a lot about math
Yeah.
and engineering. And that's just, it's actually, I heard somebody say the other day, they said, if you're not good at mathematics, the trades probably aren't for you. that most people with a trade certification actually are better at math than most college graduates. The exception being engineering and science.
Yeah.
Computer science.
Anyway, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and I think we'll get back to you here after the commercials. So we still have Slate, Mini AOC, and the border crisis. Hi, I would like to take a minute to tell you a bit about HeroSong. HeroSong is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization set up to record the music of veterans, active duty, and first responders who also have musical ambitions. Music is great for the soul, and that's what makes us unique and ever so wonderful. Please check them out and consider giving them your support. Again, that's at herosong.org. Thanks. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the content. If you are, make sure to press that like and subscribe button right down there. And if there's any material and stuff you would like to see us cover, we're more than happy to do that for you as well. Hope to have some new content coming out for our Patreon subscribers. Those of you that are, in the mood to do that, we also have one of those. Should be pretty easy to find us, the Donut Hole Show. And, yeah.
Yeah, and once we get some more subscribers, we'll probably start a merch store, do some mugs, some hats, things like that. We're just now starting out. Hopefully this episode got our audio quality fixed and continue to move forward for you guys and offer more and more every week.
Yep. So, thanks again, guys. Alrighty, guys, we're back from the break. So let's dive back into the rest of the show. Obviously, we all know that Alec Baldwin does the not quite so hilarious Trump impersonations on SNL, which have been going on for a long time. And, every once in a while there's a witty moment. But by and large, I'm kind of this isn't really that funny.
No, and actually, it's I've been a fan of Alec Baldwin in the past.
Oh, I have
some
too.
of his comedy. He's a funny guy, but he seems to have jumped the shark to being just more angry and irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but still has.
If you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
You enjoy it. Enjoy it.
It's fine.
It's a successful enough show on SNL, and it's going on. There was recently, I think she's like 8 years old, or give or take, a young girl who was doing like a mini AOC impersonation.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of pretending to be, somewhat airheaded, and she kind of has some vague, resemblance to her. And she, had a little YouTube channel and what have you, and things are going pretty well for her. I think she would make a little bit of money. And then the left gets bent out of shape to the point of sending her and her family death threats. So they actually shut their channel down, stopped it, and deleted everything. It's kind of funny that, the left is allowed to have total, political or make political satire and be do their thing, but God forbid somebody else does it. There's no tolerance for that. No tolerance for picking on one of their political figures.
Right.
So,
doxing is bad enough as it is, releasing people's personal information, and their address and phone numbers and whatnot. And that's certainly a heinous crime as it is, but to do it to an 8-year-old, that's beyond the pale. And
moreover, to do that to an 8-year-old and then be the people that pick up the doxed information and then make death threats to an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
What kind of, fucking monster are you?
Right. And this is something that I will, once again, I know we harp on the left a lot and we try to be more centrist, but right now, culturally, we just call balls and strikes, like you said.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of this behavior from the right. You do see some of it from the alt-right.
Occasionally.
And you do see some of these death threats from the alt-right. But by and large, a lot of this stuff's from the left. They just cannot stand. This was an 8-year-old girl just, making comedy. This wasn't even political commentary. It's just an 8-year-old girl who had a vague resemblance to put on some red lipstick and some glasses and just act like an airhead. And if you are so insecure that you have to make death threats against that person, obviously your ideas don't stand up.
Exactly. And I honestly, I think it's just disgusting to try to go after kids like that. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
It really is.
Which, all this toxic internet culture is disgusting as it is. Honestly, that's why we see what we see with the Democrat race right now, and that everything is just to see who's more extreme than the other is basically. Ben Shapiro said it, I guess to name drop a little bit, but I was listening to him the other day, and he says it's basically like the Democrat Party thinks that Twitter is the entire world. And that's how they're behaving with their extreme leftist policies.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's not. Most of the people I'm around downtown in Nashville, obviously an urban center, are left-leaning people. However, a lot of these more extreme things, they don't believe in. You know, just because they're Democrats doesn't mean they're an extreme lefty.
Yeah.
And I think just because of the internet and stuff, that's kind of where we've gotten is everybody just assumes they're extreme left. Or in Donald Trump's case, a lot of the left assumes that everybody who's conservative is on the extreme right.
Yeah.
But in reality, a lot of it's just toxic internet culture.
Yeah. So that's a nice little fun thing. Well, let's see what else. Of course, then we that kind of brings us back to that article, the Slate article. I think you wanted to talk a bit about.
Yeah, going back full circle to the Antifa attack on the journalist there, and I don't think it mentioned the old man because the old man didn't fit into their narrative. The old man was just trying to break up a fight and got the crap beat out of him for his efforts. But it had mentioned how this journalist, and I'm not familiar with any of this guy's work. Andy, no, I don't know, how extreme he is. I would assume not that extreme, being that he's gay, and that generally, the extreme right is not very accepting of gay folks. But I don't know. Either way, this article was basically saying there's two sides to the argument because he had been inflammatory online before and abusive towards left-wing people, and he'd been participated in doxing against people. So basically the article equates him being inflammatory and doxing to the fact that he basically deserved it. And that's kind of where it was going. Is that, there's two sides to the story. They're both bad.
But when there's two sides of the story, when back in Charlottesville, that was terrible. But now that it fits their narrative, they can go with the same explanation, and that's fine.
Right. And honestly, this is actually a very similar. Because when you say there's two sides of Charlottesville, well, somebody did get killed, and that's once again, once you cross that physical line of physical harm, that's the line. Well, we take it to this instance where, okay, doxing's bad. This guy's probably not a good guy. I mean, if he's willing to dox somebody, he's probably not a great guy.
Yeah.
However, does he deserve to be beat within an inch of his life and end up in the hospital?
No.
No, that's crossing the line to physical violence. So it's funny that the same people that would say Trump's a Nazi for saying there was good people on both sides of the Charlottesville thing would say that, this Slate article is good. Yeah, there's two sides to the story. So that's also very disturbing.
Yeah, it really is. Again, the threshold is the physical violence part. So, but it's okay if you do it on the left, apparently, which is bringing us into what I think we're going to start to see as the United States continues to fracture, is going to be these armed militia groups of sorts. And I would classify Antifa as an armed militia group, an armed political militia. And you're going to slowly start to see more and more armed political militias doing various types of things. It's not going to be like full-on assault, necessarily armed necessarily with firearms, although that may be a component. I think it's going to be a lot more, baseball bats, spike chains, things like that, causing just enough civil unrest and violence in the streets to continue to raise tensions and cause further division.
Yeah. Well, and what really worries me is when, some of the actual militias in the United States get involved. Because a lot of these armed militias, these armed right-wing militias are not protesting in the streets.
No.
They're not. They just have a set of views that basically don't take my guns, freedom, leave me alone. And the reason they form militias is because they saw stuff like this starting to come about. And now they haven't really been doing anything about it, but I can foresee a day where they will.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing, is these things are going to slowly continue to happen until there is a flashpoint. You can't continue to have a powder keg like this sitting around until there is a flashpoint. There will be a flashpoint that will cause this to continue.
And at the end of the day, with the stuff like Antifa and even Twitter and the doxing and the 8-year-old child, is that we are tolerating this as a society. We're letting it get to this point.
Yeah.
Because if the majority of the people on Twitter would, say to this person like, "Hey man, what the heck? You're doxing an 8-year-old child. Get a hold of yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming Twitter as a company here. I'm blaming the community. Because if as a whole they said, man, you're really twisted, you're messed up, we're not talking to you anymore. We're going to make sure everybody knows that you dox little kids and you're a screwed up human being.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be an issue. Same with this Antifa stuff. If the community of Portland said, send out the police, get them off the streets, we're not putting up with this stuff, this is ridiculous, this is disorder, we're having violence in the streets, we're not going to have it, wouldn't be an issue.
And same thing with the alt-right, that when they did the thing
Absolutely.
in Charlottesville, same kind of pushback. Of course, there wasn't.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And so that's part of what's driving this is just the incivility and discourse as it is. And the internet, I believe, is driving most of it because people hide behind keyboards.
Because they can. And they can vent.
I don't go out in real life and see a lot of conservatives arguing with liberals to the point where it's fisticuffs.
Yeah.
That's why it's people with masks on their face. And that's why it's doxing over the internet and death threats over the internet. Because they're hiding behind keyboards. And it's only exacerbating the problem that, a lot of these internet platforms have a left-leaning bent, which is going to make a certain people feel more alienated, making them bolder. And the people who agree with that left bent it's going to make them bolder because they feel like they're being supported by a large company or a large force.
Large
So
forum,
really
yeah.
just exacerbates both sides.
Yeah, and again, as this continues to go on, it's going to get to that flashpoint. And at that flashpoint, when things actually do kick off and things will start getting really nasty, we're going to start to see all kinds of terrible atrocities. It's going to make, doxing of an 8-year-old seem like just nothing.
Well, and what really worries me is that all this is over. This is not over actual conditions in our lives. This is all completely made up out of whole cloth in people's minds. The Soviet Union, there's an argument to be made that, the peasant class was definitely getting abused, and that's why they bought into these radical policies.
Exactly.
Some of them in the cities especially were starving, and you could see where they would buy into those policies. And, same to be said in China. You could see where there was an oppression where these people bought into these philosophies.
Yeah.
Well, now we have a situation, and I think it's unprecedented, is people think they're oppressed that aren't at all. That compared to a worldwide scale especially have all the advantages in life, but yet they believe they're oppressed. And that's what really scares me is that none of this is really rooted in reality. It's just rooted in
Garbage.
and just made up ideas.
But the point in case being is once the violence kicks off, there's going to be all kinds of nasty, horrible things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't foresee, obviously large scale thefts, arson, murder, rape, all this stuff's going to start to run rampant. Just war of attrition kind of deal as the different factions start to kick off.
And we're going to see certain places are going to let certain people get away with certain things because of who they are. We're already seeing it in Europe.
Yeah.
Thank God we're not really quite there in the U.S. I mean, the Antifa thing, yeah, but they are also getting arrested. So, but we're seeing things like in England where people are, basically being let off with a slap on the wrist for abusing children because they're Muslim or because they're disadvantaged somehow. And we're seeing those kind of stories on a daily basis from the UK. And I could see that starting to happen here. For example, Portland, you're an Antifa guy. You beat the crap out of somebody. Well, you're part of Antifa. You're part of our left-wing group here. We'll forgive you. But if you're an alt-right guy who beats the crap out of somebody, we're going to throw you under the jail.
Well, what's going to end up happening is the more that kind of stuff continues on, whether it's areas that are pro, we'll take Portland, for example, the more Antifa is able to go out and do that, the more at a certain point it'll hit a flashpoint, and then the alt-right in the area may even band together with the alt-right with a neighboring state and just come in and squash it. And the same thing with places where it's really heavy alt-right, you're going to start seeing Antifa probably bust in and cause havoc with them. And a back and forth with this, and then eventually it's going to get a flashpoint where it's not going to be like right now. I consider this. I was doing some research. You could consider this almost a hot peace is what we're in right now. We're not in like actual peacetime. This is like maybe a hot peace, maybe almost a kind of in between like a hot peace and a Cold War of sorts. Not to obviously conflate it with the actual Cold War, but that's about where we're at. We're starting to get to a point where we're starting to see lower level, low intensity conflicts, more or less within different sections of society. And I think that we are going to reach a point where the United States will end up in some sort of internal conflict.
Well, and unfortunately, and what I really hate about this the most is that your normal, average, everyday people living in a suburban neighborhood, they have no idea that any of this is going on because they're not into it like me and you. They don't study the news stories of the day. They don't, they've got their lives going on. And, at work, this he didn't know what Antifa was. Left-leaning guy a little bit, but he had no idea who that was. And I'm like, at this point, if you don't know who that is, but they're going to be the ones to suffer the worst.
Oh, of course.
And which, as always, it's the common man who suffers the worst in these kind of conflicts. But the upsetting thing is, if the people did pay enough attention to this stuff, we maybe could squash it as a society before it got out of hand. To say, hey, most of us, 90% of us, think all you guys are crazy, you're extremists, we don't want anything to do with it. But instead, we have people, it's kind of like Nazi sympathizers, you have people that, I don't want to say anything bad against them because they're kind of for my side. It doesn't matter if they're for your side or not, they're way too extreme.
Yeah.
Like Antifa with the left. I have friends who are Democrats that don't even like the word socialism. But if you looked at the internet, it would have you believe that all Democrats are socialists and communists. And hell, if you look at the candidates, you would almost believe that. Yeah. And that's the real tragedy here is I think people are not paying enough attention to prevent this. They're just going to be led to it by the small minority who is extreme and are willing to do.
Well, a lot of the flashpoints aren't going to really happen until these types of things really start to spill out from just the different political factions fighting into the daily lives of the citizenry. And once that happens, once there's enough political unrest in the streets to disturb the bread and circuses of the mass populace, at that point, things are going to start to turn into a complete shit show. And then that's the point where we're start to see the balkanization of the United States.
Yeah.
As I've often alluded to at this
Well,
point.
and you nailed it with the bread and circuses, and that's where the complacency of the people is coming in now.
Of course.
And the reason they don't want to know this stuff, because as long as they go to their little job where they make $70,000 a year and they can go live their little life in their little suburb, they don't really care. And that's a big shift in America because I think, just personal anecdotal experience, seems like in the 80s, 90s, people cared. Even if it wasn't in their community, they would watch something happen on the news and they go, wow, that's pretty crazy. And, they would care about that. But with the 24-hour news cycle and the internet desensitizing people, because you can turn on and see something horrible happening at any time. Just turn on the news or get on your phone and look up news stories. So I think people have become desensitized to it and they don't care. And the mass consumerist culture of just, like you said, bread and circuses. It's all they really care about because we've lost cohesive culture in other ways.
Yeah, there's no cohesive culture, or what little bit there's left is definitely waning in the United States. This is a country that is in decline. This was an empire, a falling empire. It's a slow, soft decline. But again, I think politically the way things are moving, economically we're at a slow, soft decline, but politically we're getting to a point where it's not as slow and not so soft.
No. And once again, it's the minority controlling the majority's opinions. Majority of people I know who are Republicans would have preferred Donald Trump to not be the nominee for president.
Yeah,
But guess who votes in the primaries is generally the more extreme, which is why all the Democrats it's also hilarious how the Republican primaries of 2016 are so similar to the Democrat primaries of 2020. 1 million people in it, vying for who can be the most extreme. Although I got to say, the Democrats are outdoing the Republicans at this point. Because
Good job, guys.
you only had Donald Trump and a couple of others that were really just going crazy. But on the Democrat side, hey, they're all going crazy. And you got poor old Joe Biden trying to be a moderate sitting there, and he's going to get raked over the coals. He already has started to get raked over the coals because he's too moderate
and moved more left. Yeah.
Right. But in my view, I would think that Joe Biden would have the biggest chance of defeating Donald Trump because he's a moderate.
Yeah.
Because there would probably be a lot of moderate conservatives who would say, yeah, I could deal with Biden over Trump. I don't like Trump.
Yeah, because you got the never Trumper types. Yeah.
Right. And just a lot of moderate conservatives in general will be like, I can deal with that. They may not like a Democrat in office, but they can deal with that. He's a moderate guy. We know what he's all about. But when you start talking extreme stuff all the time, you're just going to have more people vote for Trump.
Which is again why I think ultimately Trump's going to win the presidency, House and or possibly Senate. Maybe both will go left. I think if both go left, Trump gets impeached. They'll figure out a way to impeach him as well. Because as much as they hate Trump, damn well they hate Pence worse. They just don't talk about it because he's not important right now.
Well, what I discovered about Trump from talking to people, and this is also a little insane to me in modern American society, is they just don't like him because he's a rough, gruff, egotistical dude.
Crude asshole. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't really care about that. The president's personality does not affect me. It's what they actually do. But it seems like in America, we've gotten to a point where it's because of the increase of media. I mean, we all know from the Nixon-Kennedy debates. Why did the people who watched the show say Kennedy won, but people who listened to it on the radio say it was a tie? Because Kennedy was a young, handsome, charismatic man.
And Nixon was sweating his ass off.
Yeah, but you listen to it on the radio, the polls showed that they thought it was about a 50-50. They were about even. And that started this era of personality winning the presidency and campaigns, which I think is extremely detrimental. Because that's where we got with Trump.
That's where we got with Trump. That's where we've gotten with a lot of candidates. And that personality wins a campaign, who it's really boils down to who has the bigger cult of personality.
And right now, that's Donald Trump for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Whether you see it as a negative or a positive, whichever side you're on, he's definitely a big personality.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot to defeat that.
Again, Trump definitely has the presidential nomination, he'll definitely win the presidential race. The question in part is what's going to happen to the other branches of government. Oddly enough, from what I'm hearing in the polls and amongst other leftists, people are actually, oddly enough, liking Kamala Harris the most right now.
Yeah, and I know Elizabeth Warren's getting a big uptick as well.
Yeah, but she's not minority enough. She doesn't hit all the intersectional bits to be the perfect candidate of sorts.
Yeah.
But she is up there. Sanders has fallen off the wayside a little bit, surprisingly. I think his heyday has come and went. He would have probably beat Trump last election cycle, but this time around, I don't think he stands a chance.
Yeah, I don't think he stands a chance either.
He might get VP or something.
He was a flash in the pan because all the other Democrats have went as extreme, if not in some cases more extreme than Bernie Sanders. He's irrelevant now. The reason he was where he was with the young folks is because he was the only one talking about some of these more socialist economic issues. But now they're all socialist.
Yeah.
Which that's frightening enough. The fact that they're espousing socialism is frightening enough. And once again, the American people with their bread and circuses aren't educated enough to know that Europe is not socialism. Europe is a free market economy with a large welfare state, which we also have a very large welfare state as well. We allocate the money differently than Europe does. But when they start talking about Democrat socialism and then tying it into climate change, and it basically gives them an excuse to do whatever the hell they want. They can control your health care, the car you drive through climate change, the house you buy, it's never ending. And that's why I tell people when I have debates with them that even if you believe climate change is real, even if you believe all this stuff, do you really want our current federal government controlling this for you? And that's the scariest part to me.
Yeah.
And that's on both sides. The leftists tend to be more, but the right is trying to gain a lot of power itself.
Oh, yeah. So they're both playing the game, and like I said, it's going to turn into a shit show. Another little side note, a little fun thing to note is the fact that the Bayer-Monsanto merger finally went through.
Yeah.
So now all of our, or vast majority of our food is now owned by a German company.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, and they got rid of the name Monsanto because they finally decided they'd had enough of the PR nightmare. So it worked for them in that way too.
It did. Oddly enough, Bayer's also had some bad PR things, but those just didn't seem to stick like Monsanto's did.
No. Just because Monsanto's name has been out there for so long, everybody knows it. You talk about Bayer, people think of aspirin.
That's exactly what you think of.
Yeah. So yeah, not great, but we're definitely going to reap the rewards from our post World War II giant corporation, military industrial complex. The whole thing is I think on its last legs, and I think we're still living in a post World War II world, and we never figured a way out of it. That's why we still have NATO. That's why we still have everything we have. Not that I don't think we should be allies with European countries, but there's definitely other ways to do it. That's why we still have the UN in its current form. That's why we have China on the Human Rights Council in the UN. This is no longer sustainable because we refuse to change the model that we've been working on from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, which is all the more reason to find yourself a smaller country that's not really as relevant and also not really sought after to get out. Find yourself, even if it's a small place that you just pick up, get residency, get the hell out. Paraguay looks really good for us right now. Again, we've got to check it in person, but that's an option. But yeah, this moving forward, the United States is crumbling. I mean, I'm not quite to the point where it's renounce my U.S. citizenship, but I can see that possibly being a thing in the future.
Well, basically, what I think what I'm seeing is the world reorder itself back to a natural order almost, because this whole post World War II economy has kind of been contrived and based upon World War II politics. And we're finally getting beyond that, and the world has to reorder itself because we have a lot of new countries since then. We have a lot of new inventions. Technology is totally different. We cannot keep running everything on these same ideals that we did in 1960. It's just simply not going to work. Now, it did cause the biggest economic boom in the history of mankind, which is, I think, why people are afraid to leave it behind. But that being said, we're going to have to find a different path forward because this sure as hell ain't working.
Change or die. That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
If you don't evolve slowly over time, then it fizzles out.
Yeah, and I think that's just a lot of all this stuff is they're just trying to keep everything the same way. It's status quo, status quo. I mean, that's what we've seen with our government. Status quo, status quo, status quo. It's not going to work. And even the people that talk all this radical stuff, we all know, half of them wouldn't do any of it. Not that I support most of it, but they won't even do what they say. And I think people have become cynical because they know that.
So it's almost like they're pushing the radical envelope just to see what little bit they can get.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. And I'm also starting to become slightly disillusioned with the U.S. government, even its structure. I think ultimately there needs to be almost something that's put together that's takes the best elements of the American system, the American experiment, which was a fantastic experiment in its day, but I think it's run its course.
Yeah.
And I think you start to see the flaws that are inherent in the way it was set up. I think that we need to take the things we've learned from that, the things we've learned from the past, from different cultures, from different things,
Well, and a lot of the
create
things
something new.
that we changed that were better originally. I was reading something about 1913 was the year America died. Of course, you hear all these articles, but basically that's when income tax was put in,
And the Federal Reserve, yeah.
and the Federal Reserve. But above and beyond that, that was the year that senators were elected by people rather than the states, which I think is a huge mistake. Because senators would actually be working for the benefit of their state, wouldn't be worried about reelection because they would not be directly held accountable to the people. They would be held accountable to the state legislatures. And the House of Representatives were the direct people's representatives.
I think it's a better system. And the fact that we've changed that, and we changed that to a negative, in a negative light, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, because you basically have these senators that are just, and as we know, the House changes a lot more. Now, sometimes it doesn't. Some House members have been there forever, but a lot of them you never heard of because it changes all the time.
Yeah.
Because people try to move to governorships, move up within their state, move up to the Senate.
Yeah.
Well, with the Senate, it never changes unless they lose an election. It just never changes. And I think if you had the states controlling that, it would. Number one. And number two, this was the whole concept was you had a people's house. Then you had a house that represented the states. Well, we don't have that anymore.
No.
So the states' rights aren't being represented properly.
At all.
at all. Yeah. So that's also a huge problem. And so a lot of that structure that we're talking about has been changed from the original structure.
Yeah, and to the negative, to the detriment. But I think just in general that there needs to be just a total reevaluation by like-minded folks, I suppose. I mean, I would hate to hearken myself to being like a George Washington or a Jefferson or a Adams or anybody like that, but almost people of that caliber, of people that think about these types of things, to get everybody into a room and say, okay, I'm not calling for this yet, or I'm not calling for this. Okay, just put that out there. But almost getting people in a room together and say, let's draft up documents like or a system like that of 1776. Let's draft up a some sort of newer, updated version.
Well, we
of
have to
everything.
start thinking outside of the box because
Exactly, yeah.
a lot of the things the founding fathers got dead right, like freedom of speech,
Mm-hmm.
freedom to bear arms, freedom of assembly, like the Bill of Rights, dead on.
Yeah,
But that's probably the problem we have with the extremists on the left and the right nowadays. All they're doing is looking to the past. They're not coming up with new ways. What they think is you see this especially with leftist progressives because they like to think they're so new and progressive. A lot of these ideas are just old communist ideas.
either old communist ideas or direct democracy ideas from ancient Greece.
Yes. Yeah. So you're looking at 10-year plans straight out of the Soviet Union.
Yep, Soviet Union, Red China. It's
Yeah.
same. Yep.
And and you see the same thing on the extreme right. They're going back to a lot of religious cultural dominance, and then even authoritarian rule. I would say Nazis, but I'm hesitant to use the word because even most alt-right people are not openly espousing Hitler.
no, of
I mean, there is that crowd out there, definitely, and I've seen them online. They are out there, but that is not a huge thing. But they're still going back to these old ideas of, well, maybe we should be, I've seen people talk about, oh, maybe we should be more like in Europe times. They had this sort of system that was based on the church, and that's...
Yeah, no.
I've seen some of that stuff and just go. And I do agree we need to go back to somewhat of a traditional social structure, but that shouldn't have to do with government.
No, absolutely not.
But both sides, it's just we're looking towards the past for a fix that's not going to work for the future. And, communism and socialism, those ideas are dead. Some of the worst ideas ever.
With any ideology, there are slight bits of even failed ideologies like communism, socialism. I do feel that there is a little bit of value within certain aspects of the culture.
Well,
perhaps.
Just like we were talking about direct democracy. Direct democracy, which that is a really dangerous thing in America that people think that's good. It's terrible.
That's very dangerous.
It's mob rule. But there are ideas of direct democracy because direct democracy leads to representative democracy. Because they said, oh, okay, we can't have mob rule, but let's elect representatives. So there are things from everything that definitely work, but you can't just take these overarching ideas and say, oh yeah, we're going to do this again, and it's very popular with communism and socialism. We're going to make it work this time.
Well, there are some actual positive elements of like, we'll look at the Soviet system because I'm somewhat familiar with that. There were some positive elements within that that system. One would be the social cohesion. That was a very powerful force. Everybody was, no matter where you came from, and this is something that the Soviet Union did as a regular thing, because obviously there was, I believe, a 1 or 2 year mandatory conscription service for all men, of age. So what they would do is if they took somebody from the Ukraine, somebody from Kiev, they would ship him to Yakutsk. And he would do his station out in Yakutsk. Or they would take somebody from Latvia and they would send him down to Georgia. Or they would send somebody from Almaty in Kazakhstan and send them to Moscow. And this would slowly bring in the various different people, because obviously, these are all different countries now. But, you have somebody who's Ukrainian, they're going to the far reaches of Siberia. You have somebody from Kazakhstan who's going all the way up to Lithuania or Estonia. And they're away from their base culture, but they're starting to integrate more into the Soviet system. So there's more of these different cultures, which they would bring parts of their culture with them. But let's say they were there, they met a girl. Now they're going to stay there and have a family, and they're going to become Estonian. You know, they're gonna. It was more of a unifying factor with, it brought about more social cohesion within the Soviet system.
Which used to happen in the U.S. a lot until modern times. There's actually been studies done that people are a lot less likely to move regions now than they used to be.
Yeah.
They'll move cities, from here to an hour away, easily enough. But they're way less likely to move regions than they were, say, in the 60s when they'd say, okay, I'm from Tennessee. I'm going to go up to Washington State to get a logging job because I've got experience logging and they're paying more out there. And then he moves up there and then, and then the guy from Tennessee says, yeah, my cousin lives in Washington, and they become familiar with that area. And that used to happen a lot in the U.S. So.
You still see that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people moving from Nashville, but they're the ones that are moving now that are regionally moving are seemingly moving to flee failed economic and political party or policies within certain cities. And
which
certain
I mean,
areas.
it's still kind of the same thing. It's still economic migrants. It's just more of on a negative than a positive side.
Yeah, exactly. Fleeing as opposed to going someplace for a new opportunity.
Right. But the studies did show that like the younger people, because I mean, we those of us who live in cities would think that anecdotal evidence says, oh, that's not true. I work with a bunch of people from this state and that state and that and that and that. Mm-hmm. But when you start to look at the lower economic people, where there are better jobs, say working on a fracking crew in North Dakota, they are a lot less willing to do it. And the studies show overwhelmingly that people in the U.S. are moving, especially younger folks, are moving around, and lower socioeconomic are moving around a lot less than they used to. Because it used to be if you were poor, you did move because you didn't want to be poor anymore. Now, if you're poor, you stay in one place. And the upper socioeconomic moves.
Yeah.
So a little bit different there.
So that would have been a good idea of the Soviet system. Another good idea was the fact that there were a lot of like it seemed almost every apartment complex had like a little like playground park area for people to enjoy. That was something I think of the Soviet system. I think was pretty positive. You know, you had like the little tables where the older people would sit and play chess. You had the little playground equipment for all the kids. And there was more of a sense of cohesion and community, which kind of harkens back to the first thing I mentioned.
Which, once again, to apply that to the U.S., small towns in the U.S. had the same things with the community centers. You know, people would get married in the American Legion, and the churches would have potluck dinners, and you had the Little League baseball games and stuff like that, and you just, while that still does exist in America, once again, I think it's become a class thing. You see a lot more upper middle class people, and of course, wealthy people will always have those things. But you see a lot more upper middle class people. You see they participate in those things with their children and those community building things. And the lower the socioeconomic class you go, the less they participate in those things. Whereas small towns, 1960s, 70s, 80s, even the lower socioeconomic participated in those things as well. Whereas you're starting to not see that as much.
Yeah. So again, the sense of community, which is something we're losing in the United States, as you alluded to, like those are some things out of the Soviet system that I think were really good as far as policies. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily a policy. I really don't know exactly how to classify that, but that was something that was of their system that was a very big positive, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
So not to say that any one system out there, like every system out there has some glimmer of something that was good about it. Otherwise,
you could almost go to any country in this world, almost, save for really, really crappy third world countries. But almost any country in the world, there'll be one thing you can point to. You can say, oh, yeah, they really know how to do that, whether it be culturally or government.
Or food.
It may, or anything, and that goes back to the cultural part, but it may not, now the government may be terrible and do nothing well, but there's something you can go to another country and you can go, wow, they really do that better than anybody else.
Cuba.
Almost every country.
Cuba does this thing where they repurpose the hell out of everything. And to a point where it's just brilliant. They took like old TV dinner trays and they fashioned those into various type of antennas to be able to get like TV reception, radio reception, stuff like that on the top of their houses. Like that's a thing because they couldn't buy new TV antennas. They would refashion different motors out of things. Obviously, for the longest, I mean, that's kind of one of the staple things you think about Cuba, right? You think about all the cars from the 50s that are rolling around on the streets that have been there since the 50s. None of the parts are and they're all hodgepodge together in the most goofy way because, if they've got like an old Opel, right? A car company that's way no longer in business any longer. It doesn't have an Opel engine. It's probably got an engine from what is the Russian company? Lata?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't.
Yeah, it's probably got one of those engines in there, or something goofy like that, and like
Oh,
all the
yeah,
parts are just
yeah.
kind of goofily like shade tree mechanic put together because people had to. They actually,
Yeah, I know, like a lot of those old Chevys and stuff that people look at and go, "Wow, that's a nice car." And on the outside, it looks great,
Yeah.
but the engine's like some 3-cylinder diesel from some Russian tractor.
Yep.
You know,
That's what I mean,
and it
yeah.
maybe only goes 30 miles, 40 miles an hour. You know, that kind of thing.
Lada. That's the name of the Russian company. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
got like a 3-cylinder Lada, Russian diesel
Yeah.
engine in it, and goofy stuff like that. And they even had like a recipe, like because apparently there was also a famine and a food shortage at one point. They made a recipe for grapefruit skin beefsteak, which apparently actually doesn't, as far as like a vegetarian dish, doesn't taste that bad.
Huh.
But yeah, they would take a grapefruit, peel the like you would get like the lemon zest off of
Yeah.
it with like a thing, so you get like the harder outer part of the shell. But on a grapefruit, you have like that big meaty,
Yeah, big, thick. Yeah.
thick peel, and they would take that, they would cook that up and into like a beefsteak, or sometimes like a chicken dish,
Huh.
and
That's funny.
apparently it worked.
Yeah. Human ingenuity, man.
So give the Cubans their ability to take nothing and do something with
Yeah.
it.
And yeah, like I said, anywhere you go, you can find something that they do better. Just trying to, take from some of those ideas and integrate them together.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what we need to see moving forward. But again, I don't think the United States, in and of itself as a whole, is going to continue on. I think the best thing we can hope for is peaceful separation, amicable separation. Again, not calling for violence or revolution or anything. Not doing that. But when that does eventually happen, because it will, hopefully there's a chunk of territory that can be refashioned and reshaped. I mean, we saw this with the fall of the Roman Empire. So, if you were to ask somebody, when does the Roman Empire fall? Obviously, it's a trick question. Who do you ask? Or what's the correct answer? Rome, the Western Roman Empire, fell way before the Eastern Roman Empire, which would be, Emperor Constantine in Constantinople and modern-day Turkey. So,
Yeah, and the Roman Republic
fell real quick.
would 200-300
Yeah.
years, just like the U.S. Republic will. But the U.S. Empire will probably be around a long time.
Yeah, it probably will. And then eventually part of the U.S. empire will fall, and then part of the the rest of it will, and it'll fracture. So the question is, when do we get to be, or Turkey, and like for example, because that was part of the Roman Empire. When do we get to be Turkey and change our new and set up a new system? This might be multi-generational. This might not even be my problem. This might be my kid's problem or my
right.
kid's problem.
Right.
But I want to start the wheels, moving. Even if conversations like this would be like the John Locke of
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah,
knows?
it's starting to realize that I do think the idea for the American Republic was the best idea for a government that's ever existed
So far.
and they called it a grand experiment. But we have seen throughout history that republics got about a 300-year lifespan on average, and throughout history, republics have been the freest, best societies. However, we can't seem to get beyond that 300-year mark.
We can't hold them.
Roundabout.
Yeah, we can't hold them.
And that seems that the U.S. is no different in that. That I don't think we're going to make it past 300 years.
No.
Past 2076 with a republic. So, I don't know if it just needs more tweaking to continue down the republic path, or we just realize that's just got about a 300-year lifespan, and that's before it starts to balkanize and fall apart. Because if you look at all the republics that have fallen, a lot of it does have to do with balkanization, people moving in from other places, having different ideas, and basically you end up becoming so fractured that there's no cohesive structure to hold you together.
So it's either going to be coming up with a new system that integrates the best parts of being a republic without it being a republic, with figuring out, basically engineering the weak points out. But unfortunately, some of the weak points are specifically what gives the republic its greatness.
And that's the problem with it, and
So
that's where it's up to the people. And you can't, and that's the whole problem, because I do believe in freedom, is you can't legislate this stuff. You have to have people willing to do what it takes to sacrifice to be the moral and just people. But if they're unwilling to do that, you can't hold it.
So,
On that note,
yeah, on that note, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you guys for joining us. If you like the content thus far, make sure to press the like, subscribe button. Hit us up in the comment section and or email and reach out to us. And if you got any ideas for future shows or what have you. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So again, from our studios here in Nashville, yeah, guys have yourself a good night.
have a good one.